Hello and welcome to my booktube channel, Jack in the Book Stack, where I talk about a wide variety of book genres and the bookish lifestyle. Today we are talking about one book genre specifically, and that is classics. Because I had a goal in 2024 to read 6 classics that I pre-identified, and so this is going to be a dedicated reading vlog to the 3rd classic that I am reading this year, which is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Big shocker, right? I mean, you saw the title to this video. But this is one that I wanted to read this month in May because I'm doing a nautical themed reading month to celebrate my 2-week vacation, which is a cruise to the Caribbean. So I pair my reads with what's going on in my life. This is a perfect time to read all the nautical books that I've had my eye on, including this one. So this is by Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I don't know much about it other than its submarine vibes, which I thought was really interesting because most of the nautical themed books that I have read or have on my TBR, they're on a ship. So the idea of being in a submarine really fascinates me. And I think they might be trapped in the submarine. I think there's an element of like, I don't know, like this book makes me feel claustrophobic going into it. And I don't know if that's just because how I feel about submarines, but I want to say that they're trapped. And I also think that there's an element of like a beast, like a giant squid, and that's, well, partially because it's on the cover. But I think all the artwork that I have seen for this book, like alternate covers and different images, have like a giant squid or octopus thing. So I wonder if this is going to be like battling a creature or the creature coming after them. I have no idea. I'm going into this blind. I just know it's nautical vibes. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to research it a little bit first. I'm going to see if I want to annotate this and what I want my annotation strategy to be, which means I'm going to look up different themes. I want to see why this book is a classic. If I can find any information beforehand, that would be great. Because I love to arm myself with some background information going into the book, but I will definitely share with you what I find, and we will go through this read together in this dedicated reading vlog for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Here is what I think I have decided for my annotation strategy. So I'm going to use this pink here for moments and quotes that I love. I'm going to use the green and yellow tabs for characters, and that's both introductions and defining moments. For the blue, I think I'm going to do atmosphere. I hope this book is very atmospheric and gives me lots of nautical vibes. So naturally, blue is going to be the color to indicate atmosphere. Finally, for purple, I'm going to use the themes. And the themes, I did a little bit of research. I have lit charts pulled up, and I will also link this in the description box down below. I really like this website to look at notes for classics. So here is the analysis for 20 Leagues Under the Sea. Now, I'm not going to read the details because I have been known to spoil myself before. I'm just looking at the headers. So this is the themes. So I'm looking at the header here of what to expect. It says scientific discovery and technological innovation. I can also expect freedom versus constraint, human intelligence and its limits, exploration, imperialism and conquest, and nature versus civilization. So these are the themes that I am going to tab in a purple color as I'm reading. There are a lot, and I feel like I might be tabbing every single page, but it's not that serious. It's not like I'm being graded for capturing every single example of these themes. I'm just going to have fun with it. At first, they think it's a giant sea monster, a vast black object menacing the oceans and causing panic over the world. Yet, when Professor Aronnax joins an expedition to hunt down the creature, he and his 2 companions discover it is a giant submarine, the Nautilus. Captured and held prisoner on board by its captain, Nemo, unpredictable, enigmatic, exiled from humanity, they have no choice but to travel the underwater depths with him, encountering coral reefs, polar ice, the city of Atlantis, and a terrifying giant squid that tries to drag the Nautilus down into the deep. Combining thrilling adventure with scientific facts and a wonder at the natural world, Jules Verne's most enduringly popular novel is brought to life in David Coward's vivid new translation. I am here to check in and give my initial impressions now that I have made it 100 pages into 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. A lot of what I discussed in the synopsis has happened in these first 100 pages, so we have a lot going on. Chapter 1, we see a ship being taken down by this sea creature, and we see how it has this reputation, and everyone's really terrified of this mysterious, strong creature. It has caught the attention of Professor Aronnax, and him and his manservant are going on a ship called the Abraham Lincoln to go after this creature, to chase it down and harpoon it. And we meet their lead harpoonist as well as another main character that we meet. Fast forward a little bit, and now we are on board the Nautilus. We have met Captain Nemo, and he is a very interesting character, and I'm enjoying learning about the submarine and all the things available to them on this vessel. And I'm kind of intrigued because Nemo has cut himself off from humanity, from humankind, and he's isolated in the ship, and he's talking about why that is. And he's kind of selling me on this. On page 86, Captain Nemo says, "The sea does not belong to tyrants. They may still exert their iniquitous rights on its surface, fight, exterminate each other, and practice all the horrors they bring from the land. But 30 feet below its waves, their power ends, their influence fades, and their power vanishes. I tell you, sir, live in the bosom of the seas. Only there will you find independence. Here I acknowledge no master. Here I am free." Okay. I mean, if I get a library of books like he has, I can definitely be sold on this. So far, the book has been incredibly plot forward. My initial impressions are that if you are a reader who wants to dip your toe into classics, but who doesn't want to wade through all this symbolism and themes and lengthy descriptions of historical settings and slow character arcs, this could be a good choice for you because, at least so far in the first 100 pages, it is very plot forward. I am hoping that we dive more into the atmospheric vibes that I'm looking for with this read. There are some, though, that I am enjoying, and I'm tabbing these in blue, like on page 85. We have Professor Aronnax and his two companions are on the submarine. They've met Nemo, and they're just learning about life on this vessel. And so Nemo says to him, "What you think is meat, Professor, is fillet of sea turtle. Here you have dolphin livers, which you could easily mistake for ragout of pork. My chef is very talented and particularly skillful in dressing a wide variety of ocean produce. This is a preparation of holothurians, or sea slug, which a Malay would say has no rival anywhere in the world. That is a custard made with milk from a cetacean mother, and the sugar comes from giant North Sea fucus. Finally, may I offer you some of this sea anemone compote, which is as good to eat as preserves made from the most delicious fruits." I marked that as atmospheric because I can picture them eating this meal and how it looks and presents itself like something we're familiar with, but actually being made from something from the ocean. That was pretty interesting. As far as the writing style, it is not difficult to read. I know classics can be a little bit intimidating because it's like Old English, and this is not so far. Very easy to understand. Dialogue, inner monologue, descriptions, very easy to understand. And again, very plot forward, so we're describing a lot of events rather than spending too much time on human emotions. Now that I have read a little bit for myself and can make my own opinion of initial impressions, I went to Lit Charts to see what they had to say about this book. So I wanted to share some high-level stuff about it. So this was written in 1869 to 1870. It was written in Paris, France, published in 1870, translated into English in 1872. It is a science fiction written in the first person. And in case you are wondering, Lit Charts does say that the fish in Pixar's 2003 animated film Finding Nemo is named after Verne's Captain Nemo. So if you were wondering, according to Lit Charts, it is confirmed. Some historical context. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea incorporates a number of real historical events into its narrative, including its references to the famous maritime explorers Matthew Fontaine Maury, Jean-François de Galaup, Comte de Lapros, and Dumont d'Urville. Okay, I cannot pronounce these. Okay, 800 days Duolingo, and I still cannot pronounce French words. That's not an endorsement for the app. As well as imperialists ranging from James Cook to Pedro Fernandez de Queiroz. Broadly, the novel responds to the legacy of global imperialism in several ways. It captures the sense of excitement and triumph that accompanied Western explorers' conquering of different regions of the globe, but also alludes to the injustice, exploitation, and violence that were central to colonial exploration. The novel also responds to advances in scientific technology that accelerated in the 19th century, including the increasingly widespread use of electricity and the shifting understanding of the natural world inaugurated by the theorists of scientists such as Charles Darwin. So that's a little bit of historical background, which I like. It kind of adds a little bit of context, of background to my read. So I like seeing what's going on in the world when classics are written, because usually they're classics because they challenged what was going on in the times, or they made you relate to what was going on in the times. So I like to get a little bit of context. So Lit Charts has been very, very helpful with that. I do have some tabs, so the annotations are going well. Lots of character introductions in the beginning, but now that we're in a confined space, I don't think we will be meeting as many characters. Maybe in some of these adventures though, maybe actually in some of the adventures I mentioned on the back. So I already said this is very, very plot forward. The pacing is relatively fast. A lot has gone on in 100 pages, and it seems very much like an adventure story. That seems to be the purpose of this book. I said, you don't have to wade through all these themes and symbolism and whatever. It's an adventure story. And I think that's going to be the point of this book, which is great because that's the mood I'm in right before going on vacation. So this is going very well so far. A new fear is unlocked. I gotta be honest with you. The idea of a monstrous sea spider is going to haunt me the entire cruise. Particularly when I'm like in the water snorkeling and stuff. This vision is going to be with me the entire time. I'm back with my final review now that I have finished 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I'm happy to say that a lot of things I mentioned in my initial impressions of the book are still true now that I've finished it. I mentioned that this was a very easy classic to read and would be good for readers who don't want to get bogged down with a lot of symbolism or themes or Old English writing style or stuffy historical elements. This was very, very much an adventure story. Let me start off with talking about the plot. The synopsis that I read you at the beginning of this video pretty much sums it up, so I don't have much more to tell you than what that was. Just my reaction to it was that it was pretty decent. The encounters they had with the interesting things most of the time only lasted like 1 or 2 pages. It wasn't very drawn out, and there was this overarching plot or this overarching mystery that I didn't get a lot of answers to. So I said that our Professor Aronnax, I have to look at his name because I keep forgetting like how to pronounce it. He is on board the submarine with his 2 companions, his manservant and the harpoonist named Ned from the last ship that he was on. So these 3 are on the submarine, and Captain Nemo tells them they can't leave. Once you enter the Nautilus, nobody leaves. So they're kind of imprisoned there. And there is some kind of weird mystery element where Captain Nemo's like, okay, if I'm gonna let you live, you have to agree that at some point in our journey, I'm gonna have to confine you to your rooms, and you're not allowed to ask why, for how long, no questions, you just have to do it. You have to follow my orders. And they're like, yeah, sure, okay. And that's the only option they have. It's either that or, you know, die. So they agree to it. Other than that, they have like complete freedom of the ship. And I kind of think I know at the end like why that is and why they had to follow that command, but I might have missed something. I don't think it was really fleshed out. So I would say plot-wise, there's always a lot going on. This is a very fast-paced book because they're always encountering new adventures and great imagery, very engaging, but definitely not detailed or fleshed out, which again, I think serves a purpose to a certain kind of reader, a certain kind of mood, depends on what you're looking for. And it's one of the reasons why I say this is a very approachable classic. Now I want to talk about the characters. This is not a character-driven book. I will tell you that. Our main character, our narrator, Professor Aronnax, again, Aronnax, I can barely even remember his name. He has some interesting, I don't even know if I'd call it an arc, just some interesting inner conflict because he is a scholar. So at first, when he first gets on the submarine, he's very intrigued by all the treasures on board, all the knowledge this vessel holds, and Captain Nemo, his history and the mystery of like where he came from, how he got his riches to build this massive, massive vessel and all the treasures on board. Like, he's very intrigued by that. And just the environment that he's in and exploring the deep sea that nobody has ever explored before really, really intrigues his scholarly mind. So on one hand, he really likes being on board, but then on the other hand, he doesn't like the idea of being a prisoner. He is thinking about escape. His companions are encouraging, well, it's mostly Ned, not both companions. His servant is like the cutest, like wherever my master goes, I will go. I live to serve. So like he's going wherever his boss goes. It's Ned, the harpoonist, that really wants to escape. And the professor kind of like waffles on it because he's really, really engaged in all the things he's learning. So he does have some interesting inner conflict about that, but it's not really in depth. I think the most interesting character that we encounter is really Captain Nemo. I don't know if I'd call him morally gray. I don't know if that paints, like, I don't know if that's a description that paints the best picture, but he is one of those characters that you can't decide if he's good or bad because he's holding our 3 companions hostage on the ship. He's not letting them go. And he does make some decisions that are a little bit violent. On the other hand, he's very protective. He's very proactively protective of the innocent. They were talking about hunting, and Nemo was like, I'm not killing just for the sake of killing. There has to be a purpose. Like, we're going to eat the meat or something. So he has these moments where he is very kind at the same time. And so Aronnax, again, I have to look at, I cannot remember this name. Aronnax is reflecting, like, Nemo has turned his back on mankind for whatever reason. And yet he still has moments where he's very compassionate and really values human life. And he is very attached to like his crew and very sentimental about them as well and care about their lives. Which, by the way, speaking of the crew, we don't meet anyone else. This book really centers around 4 characters. And mostly it's Nemo and Aronnax, most of the interactions. And then Aronnax comes back and like reports back to his comrades about what Nemo said. So it's really interesting dynamic, but really centers around these 4. However, when I say it's not character driven, I mean that although we get a little bit of detail of Aronnax and what he's going through and his observations of Nemo and Nemo's motivations, the mystery around Nemo, you don't explore. I didn't feel connected to any of these characters. There was a moment where there was a sacrifice from one character to another. That should have been this real grand emotional moment because I just think it should have been really powerful, and I felt nothing. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why would they sacrifice their life for this person? Like, I just didn't feel the connection between the characters. So I didn't feel it with them and then didn't see it in each other. And so some of these big grand moments, I was like, huh? Admittedly, the plot and the characters were a little bit on the weaker side for this book, but I still stand with my earlier opinion. I don't know if those things were meant to be the point. This isn't a book that has huge revelations or historical events or politics that are super complicated. I think the point of this book is really to be an escapism adventure story. And when it comes to the atmosphere or the setting or the ambiance, I was not disappointed. At my check-in, I read you some quotes that made me feel that way and like this was very special. And it was my favorite element of the book. Just the sense of wonder and exploration was really cool. These deep parts of the sea that were unexplored, or I would say even nowadays underexplored. I don't know a lot about it. I still think the deep sea is very ominous and unknown. And there were some scenes where they leave the vessel and they go walking around the ocean floor. Those were some of my favorite scenes. And you really see a lot of the theme of man versus nature, or nature versus man, in these elements because they're dealing with like animals that they encounter. And that was really, really cool. I loved it. Adding to the sense of adventure, we really traveled to different locations. We were in Europe, we were in Greece, I think we were by Australia at some point. But I think being in the Antarctica region or the South Pole was my favorite. The descriptions of all the ice and how cold they were and what that whole adventure was like was really, really neat. It was always shifting. The atmosphere and the setting were always shifting. They're in this vessel, but the environment always changes. Now let's talk about some of the themes I said I was keeping an eye out for, and I was annotating with this purple color in the book. So, electricity. I thought it was very fascinating how much this was emphasized in the book. So I said that this was written in the year 1870, and I had to set the historical stage for myself because history is not my strong point at all. But I Googled it, and it wasn't until 1878 that Thomas Edison put electricity in his own personal residence. And he was like the first one to do that in a personal residence. So I think this is the time frame when electricity was really emerging. I think people knew what it was, but it wasn't terribly common. So when we think about this being a sci-fi novel, that makes a lot of sense. Because when I think of sci-fi, I think of technology. And this was like a brand new technology. And all the things that this submarine had available on board had to blow people's minds in the year 1870. Huge, huge emphasis on scientific discovery and human intelligence and its limits. We see that constantly. I probably could have tabbed every single page for this. Also, it kind of added to the tone of it, which wasn't my favorite thing, but it was very scientific. Constantly using terms like latitude, longitude, leagues. It was constant. Our narrator, the professor, also mentions the date of several things, so we know that this event happened on February 12th or December 16th or whatever it is, and I think that kind of adds to that dry academic sort of perspective, but I knew going into this the themes were predominantly scientific discovery, human intelligence, so it all makes sense. I didn't mind it that much, but sometimes when they're really diving into like the classifications of certain species and the histories of things, I skimmed. I really did, because there'd be a paragraph or two where they go off like on the biology of this certain sea creature or this weather pattern or whatever it is, and I didn't care. But I think if you have an interest in that kind of stuff, the more scientifically minded, it would be kind of cool. I mean, and it's all nautical. It was always about nautical elements. So it really added to the theme I was looking for with a nautical book, but just a little bit too scientific and dry for my taste, but it wasn't overwhelming. It did not distract me from the story. Exploration and conquest was another theme I was keeping an eye out for in this book, but that's another one that I could have tabbed every single page because the whole book was about exploration and finding new things. And gosh, the things they encountered, a little bit of fantasy maybe in this. I really liked the exploration element. Now for my overall opinion of the book. I really appreciate this book for what I feel it set out to do. I feel like it intended to be an escapism read, full of adventure and discovery, going into the unknown and just the wonder of the world. I feel like that was the intention of this book, and I really enjoyed that for what it was. In fact, normally when I am reading classics and annotating them, like I did for this, normally I use lit charts and I look at the analysis chapter by chapter to see like other meanings or historical context, symbolism I missed, anything like that. And I love doing that because it like deepens my read. But for this one, I actually did not do that. First of all, I understood everything that was going on, so it wasn't like that difficult writing style that I needed a translation for. But I just was really into the escapism and the adventure. I was really, really into it, and I didn't want to stop to look at an analysis. So that was really cool, and I think the book was effective in that regard. As far as the plot, I wish we had a little bit more detail there, and when it comes to the ending, I feel very unsatisfied. I feel very unsatisfied, and I can't tell you why because it's a spoiler, but oh gosh, just how? How is the only question I have related to the ending. Overall though, I really liked reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and as I already said, I would recommend it to a wide variety of readers because it was a very approachable classic, as long as you have the right expectations that it's just a good time. Like a good vacation read, right? It's not going to make you think too much about the human experience. It's just going to be a good escape. And I like that because classics can be really intimidating sometimes, and this one was just very, very approachable. And it had great nautical vibes. So it gave me everything I could possibly want right now. I'm so happy I read it. I am also so happy that you joined me for this reading vlog. If you're still watching at this point, drop any nautical emoji that you can find down below. A wave, an anchor, a ship, a mermaid, anything. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I will see you in the next video.